Many of us learned them when we were in Sunday school, when we were very young, and they are a beloved text. And sometimes, when we read something that we read a lot of when we were children or growing up in the church, we can sometimes become a little superficial in our reading of it, and we can kind of gloss it over because we know these words so well. Very possibly we memorized them when we were little. I don't know, some of us may have been part of our Sunday school requirements. So I thought it might be interesting today to take a deeper look at these particular words and what the writer was trying to do in presenting this story. This story shows up in Matthew and it shows up in Luke. The words are slightly different. Some scholars attribute this to the fact that Luke and Matthew had different agendas in writing their Gospels. Luke was a doctor. He was Greek. He was Gentile. His was the gospel of the poor, the gospel of women, the gospel of justice. Matthew's is sometimes called the royal gospel. In Luke, the shepherds came to visit Mary and Jesus. In Matthew, the kings, the wise men, the magi from the east came. So there are different stories that sort of raise up to our awareness a different focus, okay? Matthew was likely written by a strong Jewish teacher, possibly a rabbi. The words were probably gleaned from a collection of stories and teachings from the apostle Matthew, and then expanded on to create the gospel story that Matthew tells. Now Matthew, I'm going to give this teacher the name Matthew just for convenience sake today. As a teacher would have been very steeped in the history of the Hebrew people, okay? Strong grounding in the Old Testament stories and the Old Testament literature. So a lot of the structure of the stories will reflect this understanding. And what we see here is a kind of almost like a contemporary retelling of the story of the liberation of the Hebrew people and the ascent of Moses as their leader. Okay? So I'm going to take these two stories and I'm going to kind of set them up as a parallel so you can see this. In the Old Testament, you had, in the story of the Exodus, the people who were slaves in Egypt and were an oppressed people. The Israel that Jesus is born into is the Jewish people under the oppression of the Roman Empire. So you have that parallel set up. Now into the story comes Moses, who, as you recall, was born to a Jewish woman, a Hebrew woman in slavery, and was sent down the river Nile in a basket and rescued by a daughter of Pharaoh. Moses kills an Egyptian, and he is in exile, and he is returned to Judah. And as a result of his conversations with God and his call, he returns to Egypt to become a hero and a leader of the people. Okay, so you have that story. Now, part of the story is when the people of Israel are seeking their escape from Egypt. You recall Moses calls down the plagues, and after each of the plagues, Pharaoh says, no, I changed my mind, you have to stay. Another plague comes, and Pharaoh goes, oh, yes, you can leave. And when the plague is gone, he goes, no, you have to stay. And at the end of this part of the story is when God sends the angel of death to kill the firstborn in every house in Egypt. And if you don't want your firstborn to die, you put blood on the lintels of your door, and the angel of death passes over, hence the Passover, okay? So in Matthew, not in Luke, Mark or Jordan, but in Matthew, you have the heartbreaking story of Herod sending his soldiers into the villages and towns in Judea to kill every male child under the age of 2, with the hope of killing Jesus. Okay? So there you have a parallel there. You have a slaughter of male children. Now, when John the Baptist began his preaching, many people wondered who he was. And many people thought that he was the return of Elijah, the prophet. And many people ascribed that possibility to Jesus as well. So in that sense, Jesus represents the return of the hero, the return of Elijah. Now, we're going to move forward in the story to the reading we had today. We had the people passing through the Dead Sea to live in the wilderness. Jesus, as an adult, after his baptism, his immersion in water, spends 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness. As the people of Israel were tempted to rebel against Moses, because he brought us out here to starve or die of thirst. So Jesus was tempted in the wilderness. And when he began his ministry, he began with a quote from Isaiah. The Lord has put it in my heart to preach the good news to the poor, to bring respite to the suffering. Now, as the people gather on the other side of the river Jordan to take over their promised land, Moses is called forth to ascend the mountain, Mount Sinai, to have private one-on-one meetings with God. And in one of these meetings, he receives the 10 Commandments, brings them back down the mountain to the people as the basis of their law. So it's very interesting. Now Luke's version of the story is often called the Sermon on the Plain, because Jesus has gone up to the mountain to pray, and he has come down to give the sermon. Now in this telling of the story in Matthew, Jesus ascends the mountain. And when he does so, we are reminded of the story of Moses ascending the mountain to meet with God. And we're given to understand from both Matthew and Luke that Jesus often went uphill into the wilderness or into quiet places to be in prayer, to be in communion with God. So the strong sense of mountains and elevated places being those symbols of our unity with God, our ability to communicate with and receive word from God, is strong in Matthew. So actually, Jesus goes up to the mountain. The disciples come up with him. And then he's down to speak to the people, probably on the mountainside. Now, when Moses begins to talk to the people coming down from Mount Sinai, he is talking about what it means to live together as the people of God in their promised land. And proceeds to give them a number of laws, 613 to be exact, that will govern their relationships with God through temple worship, govern their relationships with the land, and their relationships with each other. Okay? So when Jesus begins his preaching, on this hillside, he isn't actually giving laws. What he is giving is blessings. Because we are now more than, not less than, not rejecting people who live by the law, but understanding how we live in a state of blessing. And when we do this, this creates a natural order. Blessed are the poor. Now Luke, the gospel of justice, the gospel of the poor, says, blessed are the poor. Matthew says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Okay? What Matthew and Luke are laying out here is not a 10 Commandments. It is a list of what scholars call eschatological blessings. Eschatology is the study of end times. Not necessarily meaning end of the world, but end of an age. This is the age when we don't live by the law so much as we live by blessing. Okay? Now, it was really interesting to think about this in terms of a lot of the political dialogue that's been coming out of the United States, and the references back to the Constitution, and the references back to the Declaration of Independence and the Founding Fathers. We're harking back to a lot of stuff here. And this is what Matthew is doing in this story. He's speaking to the people from that place. They are as grounded in these stories about Moses and the liberation of the Hebrews and the wandering in the wilderness and the crossing into the promised land and the giving of the divine laws of their land and their people. That is as grounded in them as the mythological histories of the founding of the colonies and eventually the United States. Okay? When I say myth, I'm not talking about untruth. I'm talking about the level of story that embraces truth. Okay? So, Matthew is embracing the mythology of the Hebrew people, and he's presenting Jesus as the new Moses, the new leader, the new shower of the way to his people. Now, the next few Sundays, we're going to be actually studying the entire Sermon on the Mount, because the Beatitudes are just the beginning. And after the Beatitudes, we actually have the teachings about what it means to be the people who are blessed, the poor, the persecuted, the oppressed, okay? And we will learn how to live from that place and how to live with each other in that place. But it was very important to Matthew as a teacher, a recorder, and a writer of the salvation history of people, to make sure that his readers, his followers, those who studied his work, understood that Jesus was here for his people, the Jewish people. And we know from reading through to Luke, who wrote the Gospel of Luke and also wrote the book of Acts, Acts of the Apostles, and through the writings of Paul, that there were many Jewish people who did not accept this teaching, who did not accept this way of life. And then this outgrowth of Judaism became a more universal church, more universal people of God, and again has expanded throughout the world. Our commonality is not in our race or our heritage. Our commonality is in our blessedness. Is how we live, understand, receive blessedness and blessing. So, when you are blessed because you are poor, when you are blessed because you are meek, when you are blessed because you are reviled or oppressed, you are not living out so much a commandment life as you are living out a life of blessing. And that is here and that is now. Which means to say, the future is upon us. And the blessings are not from some far distant turning of history. They are here and they are now. And as Jesus continues to preach from this hillside, this remnant of Sinai, he will teach people not so much from commandment, but from understanding. And understanding, first of all, that all of our blessings and all of our life comes first and foremost from God. And Jesus is not just the teacher of blessings. He is the giver and the bestower and the one who lives out of that place of being blessed. Moses came down from a very high place to the people, and back up again, and down to the people, and back up again, and down to the people. And in that sense, that mountain can almost be seen as that image of God being here and people being here. And if you're going to intercede, it's a hike to intercede. Okay? And it's a hike back down. And those of us at our age know that walking down a hill is a lot harder than walking up. The knees, they tell us. What Jesus has done is to come down from the place of his union with God, his conversations with God, his prayers with God, and invited the people to come to him and be with him on the mountainside, and to hear not just the laws of God, the promises of God, and the blessings of God, where God and God's people meet as one in this place and in this